What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. I'm gonna be honest with you, man. I've recorded and re-recorded this video at least 15 times today because I look. I'm. There's so much to say with this topic that, in all honesty, I would have to do a video at least something close to 2 hours long to give this topic justice. But I know ain't nobody gonna sit there and listen to me fucking talk for 2 hours. So I'm trying to be as concise as possible with how I want to say this. Okay? All right. Does Dr. King deserve criticism for his nonviolent stance, philosophy, and what ultimately the civil rights movement has led to for our people? Yes. There is ample amounts of criticism. Okay? Ample amounts of criticism for where we are now as a people as opposed to where we were 20 years ago, honestly. Um, Now, let's be honest. There are opportunities out there now that we've never had before. There are a lot of opportunities out there now that you couldn't even dream of when when King was alive back in the 1950s, 1960s. So in some ways, some things are better off. You know what I'm saying? So in some ways, we are better off. A lot of ways. Where we're not better off at is our structure as a community. We have deteriorated considerably since the 1960s. A lot of that has to do with a breakdown of the family structure, and a lot of that can be attributed to, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, this is just Too Raw's opinion, okay? But a lot of it has to be contributed to the alliance of the African American community with the Democratic Party, in particular the liberal faction. Um, Did they do a lot of great things for us in the short run? Yes. The Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, the Housing Act of 1968, 67. A lot of great things. Okay? Sweeping legislation. All right? You know, but in the long run, this has led a lot of Americans, a lot of black Americans, to be overly reliant on government assistance. Things that should be short-term safeguards have become generational welfare rolls. You know, let's just be honest. Okay, so the breakdown of the family structure where the man who is supposed to be the natural leader in families, households, is no longer in that role. And you now have women who are in that role. And shout out to the women who are holding it down. But the man who is no longer looked at in his proper respect now, oftentimes, he's in a subordinate role. And that has caused a lot of schisms, that has caused a lot of breakdown. And, to the point where now you see more than ever before resentment between black men and black women. Fathers who are not in the household. Mothers who we just saw recently in a story where a mother was so resentful and so petty that she wouldn't even let the father see his 1-month-old daughter who died of cancer out of spite. But that's just one aspect of it. There's so many different other things that contribute to where we are today. Just the breakdown of morals. You know what I'm saying? COINTELPRO which, if anything, was a reaction not only to the civil rights movement, but to the Black Panthers and militant movement. So you can't put everything on King, you know what I'm saying? And then the introduction, of course, of drugs into our community by the CIA. So that's just a few things, you know what I'm saying? Um, just led to the moral decay in our community. And we've never, ever addressed, to me, the biggest problem that affects African Americans more than anything else, the self-doubt and self-hatred that is so entrenched in us. It's almost in our it's almost at the molecular DNA structure with us. You know what I'm saying? We don't want to admit it, but all of us, even the most enlightened of us, still wrestle with that demon of self-hatred and self-destruction. All right? These are things we've never addressed. White America doesn't know anything about these types of things. In fact, they want these things to be further entrenched in us, to keep us back. So we've never addressed uh, the shackles that still are entrenched in our mindset. So it doesn't matter what we get. If we were to get reparations in some way, shape, or form, we're going to fuck it off and be broke in 3 months. There's so many different things that we haven't. We just look, man. Let's just be honest, man. Let's just be brutally honest. We don't have certain structures in our community. We don't have certain things in our community to give us a fighting chance, man. Okay? Then the way that society is set up, you know what I'm saying? Like, you have guys that, like Barack Obama, who I have soured on so much. I've soured on him so fucking much, man. A guy like him, they'll tell you, oh, we need to pull ourselves up by the bootstraps and all that. But then you wonder, though, look, how are you going to pull yourself up? How are you going to pull yourself up by the bootstraps when, motherfucker, we don't even have boots? So, yeah, you know, I'm not saying that things should be handed to us. Far from that. But at least make the playing field even for us. So, like I'm saying, like, was it all Dr. King's fault? No, I don't think it was all his fault. But the movement did contribute to where we are. But at the same time, I'm not totally convinced that if we went the route of separatism, that everything would be all cool. Especially if we were considering, like, all right, if we're going the route of separatism, are we still going to ally at all with white America? Or are we going like to the South? We're just going to be chilling here. We're going to try to create our own government because we still have the problems of white supremacy. If we don't get rid of white supremacy, we're still going to have the same fucking problems. We're still going to anoint the lighter complected people in positions of authority. We're still going to have the same problem. It's just going to emanate differently. It's just going to come up and manifest itself in a different manner. So yeah, this is my thing about criticism for his philosophy. It's very warranted. It did help to contribute to the problems that we have, but it's not the be all end all, in my opinion. Look, Dr. King felt like, erroneously, that if you were to shine a light to the atrocities that was going on in the South at that time, with police officers beating people, if you was to put that on national television, that would shine a light to the atrocities and the injustices going on in the South, and decent Americans throughout the country and maybe even the world would put their resources into correcting this injustice. Now, ultimately, the majority of Americans actually were siding with the cops to an extent. You know, there was a poll taken in 1966 where almost 70% of Americans had a negative opinion of Dr. King. This is after the afterglow of the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act, where King was standing there with Johnson and King getting the Nobel Peace Prize. What that basically says is that the majority of Americans, mostly white Americans, felt that King was an uppity nigger and a troublemaker. But are we that different now? Don't we just, when police officers are beating unjustly, you know, young men or young black men, or choking out someone like Eric Gardner, or shooting someone in the fucking head for no fucking reason like Michael Brown, always using the same fucking excuse, I was fearful of my life, even though you have a fucking weapon and this guy's 30 feet away? What do? All we do is just get our cell phones, do the same shit. We don't take action. We take a picture of it and say, well, we got you on camera. But at least King was trying to do something noble with his shit. We just do it for views. So there's that when it comes to his legacy. I do agree it should be some criticisms, but I think, it's not just King's fault. It's not just their fault. My biggest problem is the criticism when it comes to the man. I think that mainstream America has been very successful in watering down King to the point where he's this meek beta male that, you know, almost like a, you know, you know what I'm going with this, man. Make him out to be the uber coon. And a lot of this has to do with the fact that you see and have heard stories of King being beaten and King being spat on and him showing almost superhuman levels of resistance. Because I couldn't do it. I would have punched one of them fucking little girls in her fucking face. I'm sorry. I would have punched the shit out of them. Spit and punched me in my face. But the truth of the matter is, man, sometimes it takes a very strong person not to throw a punch. To show restraint. He was human. He was very human. If you look at King's eyes, that last year that he was alive, if you look at video footage of him, this is a man who knew that his days were numbered. This is a man, I'm not saying he was afraid, but you could see this was a guy that had finally kind of accepted what was to come. But he also showed a lot of strain. He had a lot of, to me, when I look at King, like photos like the last year of his life, I saw a lot of strain. I see a person that is very worried, despite the rhetoric, of the future of his people. You know, um, one thing that doesn't get talked about a lot is that King, the last couple years of his life, was becoming a lot more militant and outspoken. Not only about the war, but I think he was starting to become disillusioned by the nonviolence approach. And while I'm not saying that he was like Stokely Carmichael, who was an uh, uh, earlier apprentice of King, later on known as Kwame Ture, I'm not saying he was like those guys, but he was understanding where it was coming from, and he also was sympathetic to why a lot of young black people felt the way they felt, the anger. He understood where it was coming from. You know what I'm saying? He understood where it was coming from. I remember looking at footage of Stokely Carmichael, later on Kwame Ture, when he was affiliated with Dr. King, and the news reporters could pick up on the schism between Carmichael and King. Carmichael was open to, he didn't agree with nonviolence. He felt that he was sort of aligned more toward any means necessary. But when the media would try to talk to King about what Carmichael said, and Carmichael would be right next to him, and King wouldn't take the bait. King would say, I understand, where the young people coming from, but our stance is nonviolence. But I understand where Brother Carmichael, da 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 da. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's why I get so annoyed when I see a lot of people say, "Well, King was a coon." Like, what are you talking about? The fuck are you talking about? I don't know, man. But my thing is this. This is what I'm gonna say to close this out, right? I remember when Barack Obama was running for president in 2007, 2008. I was the biggest supporter of this guy, and my belief at the time, being an idealist, is that I thought that Barack Obama, his presidency, would sort of, by him being president, which I thought was many of mainstream America's biggest fear, a black man in charge, even though it's just symbolic, really, because who really run this country, but still, I thought that would quell their fears. Oh, no one's coming for your guns. You're not going to be, you know, you're not going to have your lifestyle change in any way, shape, or form. And I thought, that, well, if he's president, all of these fears that white America has is going to go away. But that wasn't the case. If anything, his presidency stoked the fears even more so. The paranoia and anger and resentment and bitterness and frustration. And individuals tapped into that like a Trump. And this overreaction to the presidency of Barack Obama led to the rise of a Donald Trump to become president of the United States in 2016. That's the reality. A young Martin Luther King, being an idealist, thought that if he shined the light on the atrocities going on in the South with blacks, that this would enlighten disinterested or, or non-knowing whites throughout the country and the world, that this is what's going on in the South. This is the evils of Jim Crow, and that this would quell racism and cut this cancer of racism out of the belly of the country, and this would lead to this utopian society. But the reality was, if anything, everything was happening too fast for certain people and certain Americans, and the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act and the the sudden rise of the African American community, there was this reaction, this overreaction from alt-right. And this led to the Democratic Party losing 50 seats in the House of Representatives in 1966, almost 50 seats. This led to a This led to a grand defection of many Southern Democrats to the Republican Party, and you had certain individuals fanning the flame of racism, like a Richard Nixon, and ultimately led to the rise of Richard Nixon's president in 1968, which led to COINTELPRO, and the rest is history. So there's the connection I was trying to make right there. There's always a resistance to a just cause, or what's considered to be a just cause. Now, the difference between Obama and King is that King's intentions were noble. Obama, I see, I just saw him as, I see him now as just another politician who just happened to be black. All right, at a time when it was a good thing to be black, I guess. But those are my thoughts, man, about Dr. King, man. I really think that he was generally a good man. Was he a god? No, he was a very flawed man. All right, but I do think that the way that he's portrayed by mainstream America is not the real King. This is a man that was very much in favor of his people, and the last 2 years of his life, he began to see the error of his ways. He began to see the flaws of integration and nonviolence. And while I'm not going to say that he was going to totally reverse his stance on nonviolence, but I do think that he was starting to wake up, especially after the assassination of Malcolm X. And you have to remember, at the time that he died, he was running what was called the Poor People's Campaign. And this campaign was not just going to be focused on African Americans, but it was going to also include Latino Americans and poor whites. And he was shifting his message not so much for race, but economics, which could be a problem for both parties. And my theory has always been this. This is just a theory. I can't say it's the truth, but this is my theory. I think J. Edgar Hoover had a hard on for this guy forever. J. Edgar Hoover was the one that wrote that scathing letter to him to kill himself. Of course, J. Edgar Hoover was that self-hating, self-loathing FBI director for 48 years. All right. But, and rumor has it that J. Edgar Hoover was partially black himself. And he's the epitome of what self-hatred, when it goes violently wrong, becomes. But anyway, the only reason why J. Edgar Hoover, I think, for 4 years never touched King was because of Lyndon Johnson. Lyndon Johnson and Hoover were friends. I mean, true friends. They were neighbors in Washington, D.C. For years when Johnson was Senate Majority Leader. But I think Lyndon Johnson had Hoover hold off on doing anything violent to King because King was an asset to the administration. But when King started speaking out against the war, and ultimately King was starting to become a political figure, and Lyndon Johnson felt like he was no longer an asset to his administration, I think he gave the okay to assassinate King. And another reason why I feel like that is Lyndon Johnson announced that he was running for president on March 31st, 1968, effectively ending his administration as of next year. King was killed just 5 days later. Then 2 months after that, another person who LBJ grew to hate, but hate even more than King actually, Bobby Kennedy. As soon as it looked like he had any angle at winning the nomination, all of a sudden he was assassinated. So it's two people that LBJ hated or grew to hate, assassinated within 2 months of each other in his last year of his presidency. So I don't know. You take that how you want to take it. But at the end of the day, I think King was a good man. Flawed legacy, but I think he was a good man, and I think he should retain his high standing with the African American community. I think that in their own way, Martin Luther King Jr., Marcus Garvey, and Malcolm X were pillars of our community, and the little trinkets that we do have, I think we should attribute to this guy right here. You know what I'm saying? But I do think that had he lived, his legacy would have been heightened even more so than it was in the 39 years that he lived on this earth.